Hey guys, my name is Michael and I'm back for another reaction video. Today we're starting something a bit different. I'm going to be starting two new people that I've heard a lot about. I know MrBallen from TikTok. I've seen a few of his like short stories, and I think I've also seen one of his Missing 411 short stories. And the other person will be Wendigoon. I don't really know much about Wendigoon. I've seen I think some TikToks on him and stuff, but we'll start his conspiracy theory iceberg, which I'll probably do in like multiple parts because it's like 9 hours long. So, but this one, he has a whole playlist of Missing 411. I've heard a little bit about this. I know it's like weird stuff that happens when or it happens in the woods, like missing people who are in weird situations and people don't understand how it happened or something along those lines. But yeah, yeah. So let's get into this. I'm really excited because his storytelling seemed really good in TikToks. I don't know if it was just because of the short format, but he seemed very engaging. So let's get into this.
Something very strange seems to be going on inside of national parks in North America. Every year, hundreds of people go missing in these parks, but these parks are huge expanses of wilderness. So it's not particularly unusual that people might go missing inside of them.
Yeah, makes sense. I mean, people lose their way, get hurt, get eaten by some kind of animal, just fall into water and drift somewhere. You never know. It could be all kinds of stuff.
But every year, of those hundreds of people that go missing, there's always a few that go missing under very strange circumstances. Either the way in which they disappeared doesn't really add up. Someone will be watching
Yeah,
or
yeah,
keeping
like I
an
was
eye
saying.
on someone. They'll turn around and then turn back, and that person's missing, and there's not a trace of them, and they're never found again. Or you'll have instances of someone will go missing. There'll be an extensive search, there's no trace of them, and then they're found like miles and miles away in locations that are almost impossible to get to. Now, one
We said almost impossible, so I guess there is, it is possible for them to be in those locations. It's just super unlikely.
man, David Politis, who's a former police detective, he began researching these very strange disappearances inside of
That's like the
national
worst
parks.
photo he could have
It
used of
started
him.
when a park ranger actually approached him and said, "Hey, there's a bunch of weird things happening in state parks. You should look
Oh,
into it
a
because
park
you're a
ranger.
former detective." And so after looking into it, he discovered that there were so many oddities around many of these strange disappearances. And he saw there was many overlaps and similarities that he really dove into it. And he's examined thousands of these strange cases. By
Dang.
his count, 10,000 plus hours of research. He's written 4 books. They're all under the name Missing 411. If you
Yeah, make sure you check out this dude. I mean, he's the one who originated it, so obviously check him out. I'll put a link in the description for him too, because obviously this is his work, so he should be credited for it. And I'll also put one for Mr. Ballen because he's the storyteller, so he should be credited also. So yeah.
you Google Missing 411, you'll find a plethora of information about these cases. He has 2 documentaries out. And so David, while he doesn't actually take a stance as to, what's causing these strange
I mean,
disappearances,
yeah, he should be
anybody that
unbiased.
follows along with the Missing 411 cases is basically led to believe that something is hunting humans in North America inside of national parks. It is
Ooh,
fascinating, it is
that is creepy.
terrifying, and I've picked out 5 of the most bizarre cases that I've come across inside of Missing 411. Before we get
Cool.
into those 5 stories, though, if this is the type of content that you're interested in, the strange, dark, and mysterious that I've kind of promised in this video, well, that's what my channel is all about. And I post 3 to 4 times a week. And so if that's your style and you like that type of content,
Dang,
if
he
you
uploads a
could,
lot.
please gently lambast the like button and then please turn on all notifications so you
Lambast.
don't miss any of.
Yeah, so before he gets into this, one thing you gotta understand is I've done a few like narration things. It's really hard to narrate. It really is because you have to be kind of charismatic. You have to, be in the story. And so when you're narrating, you have to be excitable. Whereas he seems to be pretty good at it. He might be naturally good at it, uh, but I'm not. So it's very hard for me to do stuff like that. So I don't know how he does this 3 or 4 times a week, or 4 or 5, or how many times he said.
My weekly uploads. All right, let's get into the stories.
David
On
Martin.
Father's Day
Or
weekend,
Davis Martin.
1969,
Dennis Martin.
6-year-old
So
Dennis
bad.
Martin, his
Dennis Martin.
brother, his father, and his grandfather headed up to the Smoky Mountains to go camping. This was a family tradition on Father's
Wait. He was 6 years old?
1969, 6-year-old Dennis Martin,
Okay.
his brother, his father, and his
Seems
grandfather
alright.
headed up
Yeah.
to the Smoky Mountains to go camping. This was a family tradition
Oh, okay,
on
okay,
Father's
okay.
Day, and they were really excited about it. They get to the same campsite they always used. They set up, they have a wonderful first night, they camp out, and the next day, another camper in the area happened to walk by and saw that Dennis and his brother were playing there. And so this camper had kids as well, and he asked Dennis's father, hey, would it be okay if I brought my kids by? They're the same age as your sons, and they can just play together. Dennis's father says, sure, bring them down. And so the man goes, gets his kids, they come back, and before long, all the kids are playing hide and seek. Now, Dennis's father would say that he had an eye on Dennis the whole time.
That's always one of those things. I don't want to say anything bad about any person in this situation. You always think you have your eyes on your kids, like, all the time, but it literally just takes a second. Like, you could turn your head, the kid hide behind a tree, you won't know where he is. It could be that simple, but I'm going to take his word for it and say he's been, trained onto his kid, and he's been watching him the whole time.
He was just at a distance, but watching his son to make sure he didn't get lost. And so at one point, all the kids are hiding from the parents. And, at some point, the parents say, okay, show yourselves. And all the kids, except for Dennis, show themselves. And Dennis's father has watched Dennis go behind a particular tree. He watched him do it. He was watching the whole time. And so when they said, come on out, and he didn't come out, he actually wasn't that concerned, because he
I wouldn't
knew
either.
exactly where his son was. And then after a few moments, he yelled to his son directly and starts walking over and says, Dennis, come out, Dennis, I know you're behind the tree. And when he finally got over there, Dennis wasn't there. Dennis's father immediately starts running off into the woods, screaming for his son. And he actually ends up running almost 2 miles up the Appalachian Trail, hollering for his son, and he can't find him. And then the rest of the family had broken up and was searching the area, because they're thinking, like, he couldn't have gone very far. He was literally just here. And Dennis's father had said before, like, I watched him go behind the tree. I watched him. I don't know where he is, but I watched him go behind the tree.
That's weird.
So they're searching everywhere, and Dennis is gone. So a huge search, in fact, the biggest search in park history, ensues, with 1,500 searchers. That included the Army Green Berets, so the Special Forces got involved. They are combing.
That's actually really cool that, Special Forces came out just for this kid.
A 60 square mile plot. They're looking everywhere, and there is nothing. There is no trace. There's no
60
scent.
miles.
There is nothing connected to Dennis Martin anywhere. And so they go back to Dennis's father, and they're like, you have to tell us what you saw. Again, this doesn't add up. If you were looking at the tree and he was right there, how is it that he has just vanished into thin air? But no one knew. That was it. No one knows what.
All right, I'm going to make a bold prediction. I'm going to say well, it's probably unexplained kind of stuff. I was going to say he fell into some sort of, like, hole. That's the only logical thing I can come up with. He fell into a hole, maybe knocked himself out, and searchers went over his body at that point. He didn't hear it because he was knocked out. And, later on, he eventually woke up, but by that time it was probably night, and no one could find him.
What happened?
Which I don't know if he survives or not, so I'm just making a suggestion, guess.
David Paulides was doing his research for Missing 411 and was researching the Dennis Martin case, he interviewed other families that had been at the campground at the same time that Dennis had gone missing. And one of those families was the Key family.
Oh, I guess he was never found, actually.
Park ranger where they could go on the campground where they might be able to see some bears. And so the park ranger obviously said, be careful, but you can go over here to this section of the campground and you might see a bear. And so they head over there and they're looking for bears. And one of their children hears a scream, or thinks he hears a scream, and kind of directs the family to look in the direction of the scream. And from their vantage point, they could see up onto the side of this mountain where there was, call it sparse trees all over the mountain, so you could kind of see in between the trees. And they saw what looked like a bear running along the mountainside, but with something slung over its shoulder. Except the interesting thing about this bear was the father was quoted as saying that it didn't really act like a bear.
Slung
It was
over its
actually more like
shoulder.
a human the way it was running. It looked, hairy and like
Hmm.
an animal, but it was running and dodging between trees. It was holding this what looked like a child over its shoulder. It
Hmm.
acted almost like a human.
Yeah, that's
And so you have
weird.
a bear man that has been spotted by the Key family, and they bring this up to the investigators that are looking into the Dennis Martin case. And obviously the Dennis Martin investigators, they don't take
They're
this
gonna be
seriously.
like, come
They
on
think
now.
that they're just saying some ridiculous thing for attention or whatever it is. So it never really was entered into the case with Dennis Martin. It wasn't until the missing 411 cases that it was ever connected. But there really was a family that claims to have seen a bear man carrying a child about an hour after Dennis
Weird.
Martin had gone missing in the same area where Dennis Martin had gone missing. In the spring
Keith
of
Parkins.
1952, 2-year-old Keith Parkins was.
So there was no closure for that. So he was never found. Oh, that's so sad. He was just a 6-year-old too. That man, that's so sad.
In the spring of 1952, 2-year-old Keith Parkins was playing with his
2-year-old.
siblings outside of his grandfather's
Two.
ranch in Ritter, Oregon. And when the
Oh, that's
kids were
beautiful.
all called in to have lunch, Keith was nowhere to be found. And so the siblings and the family went out and did a cursory search looking for Keith. And when nothing turns up, they call in authorities, and a full-fledged search is launched for Keith. There's no sign, there's nothing. And 4 miles away from the.
That's one of those situations where it could be like literally an animal came into their yard and snatched up their kid, but I feel like they would hear it because a 2-year-old would scream so loud that anyone in like a mile radius would hear them. That's the only thing I could think. And then obviously the one where it wandered off, the kid wandered off. But it's a 2-year-old. He can't get very far. 2-year-old? I don't even know a 2-year-old that can walk a mile. So I doubt they could get very far.
The ranch, they find several hours later some footprints that look like they might belong to a 2-year-old. And they start tracking those
Hold
footprints
on. I missed
4 miles away from the ranch. They find several hours later some footprints that look like they might belong to a 2-year-old. And they start tracking those footprints, and they go on for miles and miles, and then they just kind of stop. And it wouldn't be until the next day, 12 miles away from from the ranch, that they would ultimately find Keith. Surprisingly,
Is he
Keith,
alive?
who had disappeared with not enough clothing
Okay, he
to be
seems like he's
out
alive.
in sub-zero temperatures with snow on the ground, and being 2 years old, he wasn't prepared for a night out. He was found alive,
Oh, thank
face
God.
down, 12 miles away. His
Face down.
jacket and his hat had been stacked neatly next to him, and he had scratch marks all over his face, but he was unhurt. When asked, what happened, he's 2 years
Was he
old, he had
abducted?
said a cat scratched him, and he kept repeating that a cat had scratched him. That was the only thing that he could articulate. No one knew
Hmm.
how a 2-year-old, in the span of 20 hours, could have moved in the middle of the night
At 12
12
mile?
miles
That's
away.
crazy.
Les Stroud, who's a very accomplished outdoorsman, he's the star, he is Survivor Man.
Yep.
He actually,
I remember watching him.
because of this case, went out and tried to actually cover the distance in the allotted time. You have 20 hours to cover this 12 miles. And he couldn't do it. And he even said, it's not possible for a 2-year-old to have covered this distance.
But if he couldn't even do it, it's not possible for like a experienced person, like a man. Why is he saying 2-year-old? Like he couldn't do it. He's a full-grown man and he's like a survival expert. My only guess is someone was running with the kid for most of that time, but 12 miles is a long time.
Let alone survived the exposure to the elements in the time that
Oh
he was
yeah,
out
in
there.
the
But
cold, get
somehow he
hypothermia.
did. And years and years later, Keith was interviewed, because now he's a grown man. He was interviewed about what happened.
Oh, I
He
doubt
has
he
no
remembered.
idea. He has
Yeah,
no memory of it.
2 years old. There's no way. I don't remember anything from
At the
before
end
I
of
was 10.
1973, 19-year-old Charles McCullough, who was an amateur photographer, had been doing a West Coast tour of the United States, going to all the different national parks to photograph beautiful scenery. And by January of 1974, he was in Oregon and wanted to go to Crater Lake, where he wanted to take pictures of Crater Lake. So he asked his friend, who had an all-terrain vehicle, to take him out to Crater Lake, because his van, which was this VW beat up old van, it couldn't have made it out that far. And as his friend is driving him out to Crater Lake, Charles says to him, kind of jokingly, yeah, if you don't hear from me in a couple of days, file a missing person report. Sure enough, a couple days later,
Yeah,
when
it's
Charles
definitely a
doesn't show
joke.
up, that friend does file a missing person report, and an extensive search is conducted at Crater
Wow.
Lake to find Charles. There's no sign of Charles. There's nothing.
I wonder if his friend, if that was just like he was actually meaning that, and he had chose to do something. Obviously, you know what I'm talking about. And he just wanted someone to eventually find him. That's the only thing I could guess.
There's no
If they don't find
anything
him,
about
obviously.
Charles. And his father actually flew out there and stayed for several months, just constantly searching the area. Found nothing. So nothing is found. So a year later, a couple of backpackers were hiking the
Oh, they're
area
gonna find
around
him.
Crater Lake, and they get lost. They take a wrong turn, and they're well off the trailhead, and they discover a backpack. In the backpack, they found a strange-looking Volkswagen key that anyone that knew Charles McCullough knew that he had this strange key. And so when they found it, it was a distinctive key. And so when they gave it to police, it turned out that it was Charles McCullough's backpack. So investigators went out and started looking in the area that this backpack was found, which was 12 miles off the trailhead. So this is well off
That
the
man was
trailhead.
lost.
And near the backpack, they find what remained of Charles McCullough.
Oh.
So they found.
I mean, what can I expect? He said a year later. I always hold out, some form of like maybe they made it, because I always kind of wish they will. You never know. Man could have survived out there for a year, just like the picking berries and killing animals. I doubt it, but you never know. You never know how people are. Some people are amazing like that.
His pants unbuttoned and on a log, as if he was.
Wait, hold on.
And near the backpack, they find what remained of Charles McCullough. So they found his pants unbuttoned and on a log, as if he was sitting on the log and then just disappeared into the ground. But his pants were still there.
Or he just
Sticking
took off his
out
pants
of
while
the
he's on the
pants
log and got
were
up
his socks,
back.
no shoes, and in the socks were his feet bones. There was no jacket, there was no upper portion of his skeleton. 12 feet away, they find a portion of his skull. And that is the last thing they find of Charles McCullough. And ultimately, it was determined that he died of natural causes. His family was not prepared to accept that. However, when you look at some of the circumstances, we have, he's missing his jacket, he's missing his boots, he's missing his photography equipment, his head is detached from his body. He was also 12 miles off the trailhead. And when he went missing, there had been approximately 5 to 7 feet of snow that had dumped in the area. So how did he move 12 miles off the trailhead in 7 feet of snow, especially when you consider he was not an outdoorsy type, and even when he got dropped
Oh, he
off
wasn't. Oh.
by his friend that drove him out there, he even said later on that he felt like Charles was very ill-equipped for the environment he was going into. But at the end of the day, it was left as, sorry, he went missing and he died of natural causes, and that was that.
Ah, that story is so hard. Something had to have happened. He couldn't have just died of natural causes. I feel like his body would still sort of be there, because it's just feet bones in his, inside of his shoes. You would imagine that some form of tissue would still be in there, and something would be in there. If not, like an animal would have messed with the shoes, moving them around, but they were, in place. Or he said socks. You would think an animal would have tore up the socks or something, but they were fine, I guess. That's a weird story. Weird.
Bart Schleyer was a famous outdoorsman and hunter. He was just one of those people that you could drop into any environment, and he's not only going to survive, he's going to thrive. A testament to that would be he spent months in Siberia tracking and catching Siberian tigers. He was like a world-renowned tiger tracker. He's just like this super rugged, super competent outdoorsman. In September of 2004, Bart books a float plane to take him 175 miles north into the Yukon Territory in Canada for him to go hunt moose on his own for 3 weeks. He had all the right equipment, he was obviously extremely capable, and no one thought twice about it. When he got dropped off, he told the pilot, meet me back here in 3 weeks. And so off he went. The plane leaves and comes back 3 weeks later, and there's no Bart. Now, the pilot knew Bart was like a god in the wilderness, and so he wasn't really concerned, but He went over to where he had been told his campsite would be, and he found the campsite. And it looked like someone was still living there. It didn't look like it had been destroyed at all. And then near his campsite, he found a dry bag, which looked like it had an indent on it where someone might have been sitting on it up against a tree. And then next to the tree was his bow and some arrows. And it looked like an area where a hunter might have been sitting to call in moose, but there was no Bart. Near the dry bag and the bow and arrow, they found Bart's teeth and a couple of shards of bone. Initially, the thought is, well, a large predator
he
must
got
have
killed,
snuck up on Bart and eaten him. Except there's a couple of huge problems with that theory. One, Bart, his friends at least would say, and people that knew him would say, he would never get snuck up on by a large...
Alright, I'm gonna call... I know people are they think the world of other people, but anyone could get caught lacking, especially out in the woods. Even if you're super experienced, it just takes one time. Just one time, and, you can get killed by an animal. I don't know if I trust that one completely.
Large predator. He was so accomplished in the wilderness. Like, he was always a step ahead of everything around him. So the idea that he would just be sitting there one day and a bear would just happen to sneak up on him is pretty far-fetched. Also, in the area where his teeth and some of his bones were found, there was no sign of what they call a death struggle, where you're fighting for your life, you're smashing into everything. There's none of that. There's no marking on the ground or in the surrounding areas that a large predator had attacked him. Also, his camp had food out in the open, and if a large predator had come through, like a bear, after...
I'll say I stand corrected. I mean, a bear or some kind of animal would eventually, after it got done eating him, it probably would have went after the food or whatever. Yeah, that is weird. And the death struggle thing, I guess it's been 3 weeks. The elements could have taken that stuff away, but the food thing is really weird. Yeah, the food thing is super weird.
It finished with Bart, it would have raided the campsite,
and
it didn't. And so the way this was left was he was attacked and eaten by...
It is definitely weird, though.
But nobody believes that because that wouldn't happen to Bart, and the circumstances around his campsite didn't really add up.
Yeah, the circumstances were a bit weird, like I said, but he could have been snuck up on and killed. But the death struggle thing, I could see like elements taking that away. But the food thing is what's weird, because an animal would have got the food.
In 2002, Christopher Tompkins was working as a surveyor, and he was assigned to this 4-man survey crew that was working in Harris County, Georgia. And they were walking along this road spaced about 50 feet apart, all 4 of them. And Chris was the last one in line. And the third one in line would later tell investigators and police that as they were walking along the road, he would periodically turn around to just, for a quick second, make sure Chris was still there. And as they're walking along with no sound or any indication that anything's happened, he turned around, saw Chris, kept walking. A few minutes later, turned around, and Chris is gone. The third guy hails the other 2, and they go, and they're like, where did Chris go?
Yeah, that's
They're
weird.
looking down the road, like maybe he stopped, maybe he stepped off the trail, but they can't see him. And they go back they start walking down the road towards where he would have been, and they find on the ground a pile of loose change and some of his tools that would have been in his pockets. And then they see one of his boots stuck in the barbed wire, because there's a little barbed wire fence that was running the length of this road. One of his boots was stuck in the barbed wire, and there was nothing else. They searched the area, they're looking everywhere, there's no sign of him, and it didn't make any sense to the people in this survey crew, especially the guy who was third in line, who was like, I literally saw him a minute ago.
I can only guess like
there's no way he could have gotten away without me hearing or seeing some indication of where he was.
I can only guess that his pants ripped, and that's where the loose change and tools came from. His pants ripped, and when he was running from something, obviously, or he went crazy or something. But his pants ripped. He, ran through the barbed wire, lost his shoe, and just kept running. That's the only thing I can give this to.
But there was no sign of him, and he was gone. So after this huge investigation,
it's super weird that they don't hear anyone.
And that's it. They're just like, yeah, he's gone. They did find 9 months later, they found his other boot near a swamp 900 yards away, but it didn't provide any more clarity into what happened to him. However, if you look at the pile of loose change and things that were in his pockets that were on the road, it indicates that at some point he may have been turned upside down. And if you think
Oh,
about
I
the
didn't think about that. That's
entirety of
weird.
all of these strange stories, where the idea being someone could be hunting humans, just picture in your head Chris
Oh,
Tompkins
that's
walking along
creepy.
and something
And
flipping him
something
upside down, dumping the
grabs him.
contents out, and then being gone in a matter of a minute where no one can see where they went.
Oh,
These 5 stories are just a fraction of the literal thousands of others that are covered in the Missing 411 series. And while many people believe that all of the cases in Missing 411 and any others that ultimately are considered strange inside of these national parks have a rational explanation, even if we don't know what it is. Whereas another group believes that this Missing 411
could
phenomenon
be either.
is an indication that something is
Is
hunting
hunting. Yeah.
humans in the
Could be
national
either.
parks
Really.
across North America. Some say Bigfoot, some say aliens, some say something else.
Could just be an animal.
But paranormal
You never
is
know.
certainly the other camp in terms of trying
Sure.
to explain away what these strange disappearances are from or what's causing them. Whether or not we ever find a definitive conclusion remains to be seen, but I would love to hear what you think is going on inside of these strange cases of Missing 411, whether it's a rational explanation or maybe something paranormal or some other option. But I'd love to hear what you have to say in the comments. And that's going to do it, guys. If you enjoyed this, please, if you could, gently lambast.
Okay. That was a really good video. I knew he was kind of good from his TikToks, but he does pull you in. I'm also sorry if I talk too much, but I mean, that's obviously what a reaction is. I'm supposed to be reacting to the actual things, not just watching the video. But yeah, that was really good. The second story really got me. I was like, I don't know how that's possible. Like that just doesn't make sense. Second story, no explanation for me. Like I like abducted, but even still, like a full-grown man did that journey and still couldn't, you know, be the same as what the little kid did, apparently. But yeah, that was really good. I really enjoyed this. I'll probably do another one real soon because this was really cool. But I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you guys later. Bye.